The biggest challenge, I think, in this entire writing process, when it comes to just becoming a better writer, is a lack of awareness on where your weaknesses are. I notice this a lot, obviously with myself as well, but I think in most avenues in life, people tend to develop a certain skill to a pretty competent point. On their own, I think people can get relatively far in kind of being able to become competent at a certain thing. If you're trying to play an instrument, for example, I think a lot of people can sort of self-teach themselves or watch lessons online or whatever on how to, say, play guitar, and they can get pretty far. But I think what holds people back is they lack an understanding of where their weaknesses are. They're unaware of them. And it's not just areas that you've neglected. I'm talking about very foundational things that you may not know or you may not have developed. And in fact, what you've done is you've gotten so good at playing, like just use a guitar example, you've gotten so good at playing guitar and you've gotten so good at compensating for this very foundational weakness that when someone finally points it out to you, you go, oh my God, and then you fix it, and then all of a sudden you're doing multitudes better. It always seems to happen after a few years, after those first initial few years. The beginning years of any skill, especially in writing, you can pretty much do it on your own. I mean, like every writing video, I think on YouTube, I'm obviously being hyperbolic here, but like most writing videos are designed for the beginner. They're designed for someone in their first few years. Why? That's basically for two main reasons. Number one is it's the easiest content, basically, like to create, right? If I can address the very simple solutions, it's really easy to create content for that, right? It's a lot harder to create content that's more niche for very specific and more advanced ideas. That's part of it. Number two is just financially, it makes more sense. You want to cater to the beginner because the beginner is going to be one that's looking for the advice the most. And there's a lot more beginners that start out at something than there are people that are intermediate. There's a kind of funnel process where people, as time goes on, they stop doing a certain activity. So you're always going to get your largest share, basically, of the market from the beginner, because that's where the majority of people are always coming in. As people go through the process, they get weeded out. They lose interest. They're not as engaged with the process. And if you start creating content for intermediate level individuals, well, you're not gonna get as many as you're gonna get beginners. But what happens, I think, is people get past that beginner stage. They get past like the first 3, 4, maybe 5 years of something, and then they hit a brick wall and they can't figure out what it is. And they try to kind of what's worked before. They try to spin their wheels, and what's happened is they're missing some very foundational thing. It's a very, very small thing that it can be, it's like this one area where they're weak. And it's not even like an egotistical thing of like, oh, you need to develop this area and you're very egotistical and you think you don't have to. It's a complete lack of awareness. They don't even know basically what they have to work on, what they have to fix. And these are the people that often end up going for things like MFA programs, for example, because you get to work with somebody, you get to work with authors who can look at your work and diagnose it and sort of go, okay, yeah, you're doing really good here, but this area of your writing is where you're weak. This is what you need to fix. And you go, oh, wow, I never realized that, but now that you point that out, it makes sense. Of course, it never happens that way, right? Like what happens is that someone has like a mistake pointed out and there's the kind of an emotional reaction of, I don't know, is it really? Then you do it and you spend like 6 months trying to fix it. And after 6 months of like anguish, you fix that. And all of a sudden your writing jumps up like, on a scale of, if you're like a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, your writing all of a sudden jumps to an 8 after you fix it. And you go, wow, that was really cool. And this jump happened really quickly. But what it was just correcting that one small thing there, and the skills you'd already developed before then were able just to flourish even more. And again, it's the same for anything. I mean, I remember when I was working with a guy on my squat, basically in the gym. This gentleman held a record at one point, and I went to him basically, and he was like, "Yeah, you're doing good, but you don't tuck your chin. You lead with your head. My head basically was sticking too far out." He's like, "If you pull your chin back, you'll have a more stable platform, and you can put more weight on." And small fix, but in the 3 years that I've been training, basically, I never knew that. But all of a sudden now I'm putting up basically more weight than I have before, just because it's a small fix. Same thing with writing. It's the same thing with any skill. It's a very small thing at a certain level where you get to, like, again, I'm going to say intermediate. Like, when you get to an intermediate level, there's probably going to be a couple small things that you are missing. It's what's holding you back from getting to that more advanced stage. But again, you probably don't know what it is, and it requires, unfortunately, going beyond just self-training, beyond even reading books and studying. It often, I find, tends to require a mentor of some sort, going for an MFA, getting some sort of writing coach, something like that. I think it tends to require that, because you need to have a specific thing addressed, and it needs to be corrected. Unfortunately, I think the problem is, I think there are people that are listening, that might listen to this, and they might think, "Oh, that's me. And you have to kind of realize where you're at. If you're just on a plateau in your first couple of years, it's probably not one small, couple things that need to be changed. It's probably just you don't have enough experience yet. You don't have enough time under your belt base. You haven't put enough time at the desk yet to get to that next, to get to that next point. You're just in a plateau that just takes time to overcome. The stage, it's hard, I think, to define, but I think it comes at a certain point when you've gotten some years under your belt, you've gotten a fair amount of time, you've gotten books that have maybe, I'd say a good standard maybe is you've queried books, you've queried short stories, and you're getting back perhaps personalized rejection letters, right? You're getting, you query a book, and someone, doesn't send you just a standard form, like, oh, rejection letter, or you never hear back, but they actually send you something saying, "Thanks so much for thinking of me, but my catalog's full right now, and I'm not sure if I could find a market for this place, or I can't find necessarily, a market for this book." Well, right there, that's probably when you're starting to get to the point where maybe you need to start reassessing those very foundational things that maybe you're missing. Maybe, again, it's going to be probably just one or two, maybe three small things that you're doing wrong, that are areas that you haven't developed yet. And once you do that, once you take 6 months, take a year to fix it, you break that plateau gets broken through. That plateau you just shatter it. And again, it's hard to identify it. It's hard to realize when you're at that point, and it's hard to make that decision to find someone else to maybe help you overcome it. But I think mentors are probably the best fix for this type of scenario. And so, as far as where I'm at right now in my process, I think I've corrected a lot of my mistakes here. And I think at this point, for me, just to get more personal here, I think a lot of the issues I've faced were more ones that just come with time still. These are ones that just come with time. And it doesn't mean that, once you kind of get to a certain point that, once you fix all your mistakes, it's all time. I mean, there might be still some issues I need to address, but from what I've seen with my own progress and where I'm at right now, a lot of it seems to just be things that are coming with time, with a novel that I sent to the publisher there back in the summertime that I'm still waiting to hear back on. Again, these are things where, you're on the right track, I'm on the right track, and I'm not sure where it necessarily will end. I'm not sure, if I'm at that level yet. It feels like I am. I feel like I'm on the cusp of that, and I feel like it's just a matter of time. Like, it's just the right project, just the right project, the right publisher. It's the right artistic choice, maybe. But it doesn't feel like it's a lack of fundamental understanding anymore that's holding me back. We'll see. I could be wrong. I can make it back on this thing in like 6 months and be like, yep, for the past year and a half, I've been doing this. I've overlooked this element of my writing. I need to fix it and make it stronger and make it better. But for now, I think it's a matter of just sort of timing, of just more experience and just timing, and eventually it's coming my way. So yeah, that's kind of a lot. I think maybe I meandered a little bit in that, in what I said here, but again, the idea is if you are at that plateau, if you've had maybe, the 5 years of writing, you're at that plateau, it could be that you're missing a couple fundamental things. And yeah, mentorship is probably the way to do it. That's probably the best way. Find, if you don't want to go to college, pay for college, and I get it. Believe me, it's expensive. Find a local writer, find a local author, find someone who's been published. Find someone and have them read your work. I mean, critique groups are great for this too. Like that's another good point. They can reinforce some bad things too, which is why you have to be really intelligent about when selecting a critique group. But yeah, you got to find. I think you have to find somebody else. As much as I tend to advocate that you often have the answer inside of you, and all that sort of cliched things that I've said before. There are periods where having a mentor helps, and around that mark, around that intermediate cusp mark there, where you're no longer in the beginning stage, that's when you really have to get those fundamental things down pat, because you're never going to go beyond that if you haven't addressed them.